Hi everyone, my name is Henry and this is Pryce's first ever online carol service. I'm so excited to welcome everybody here. What I really want for Christmas this year is to end homelessness for everybody. Oh, a new Fitbit will be amazing as well. Sarah will be your host for tonight, but before I go, I hope everyone has a really great night. Have a Merry Christmas and may the Force be with you.
A very warm welcome to all of you on this special evening, Chrysis's annual carol service. This year the service is virtual and it'll feel a bit different as a result, but we know you're going to really enjoy it. And we've already seen tonight's first superstar in Henry. Thank you, Henry, for opening this year's service, but also for being Chrysis's own Jedi hero. For those who don't know, Henry was inspired by Sir Captain Tom Moore and decided to run a marathon over 10 days, all in aid of Chrysис. Henry raised nearly £10,000 to help end homelessness. A really big thank you to you, Henry, for all your efforts this year. And of course, this year has been unique. Unique in the difficulties and pain many of us up, down and across Britain have faced. Unique in terms of the impact on our daily lives. There's been lockdowns, social distancing, support bubbles, phrases we'd never even heard of are now part of our everyday vocabulary. It's also been unique in the challenges we've faced in continuing to support the people we work with here at Chrysис on a daily basis. It all sounds pretty doom and gloom, but unique times can prompt and accelerate unprecedented change. We've seen what we always knew was possible, that people without somewhere safe to call home can be found accommodation. The pandemic drove collective action by local and national government to ensure everyone facing homelessness could be safe from the virus. The pandemic has shown what's possible and provides hope that we can live in an age where no one finds themselves without a home. Homelessness is unacceptable in today's world, but here at Chrysis we know it's not inevitable. We see the positive impact that collective action can make when tackling the root causes of homelessness. And it's been amazing to see how you've all continued to work with us towards a world without homelessness, how we've adapted throughout the year, and how we've all supported each other to make sure everyone who needs our help receives it. It's a shame we can't all be in some of these beautiful locations decorated for Christmas, but we can't wait to welcome you back to these amazing places next year. Now on to this evening. The exquisite music you can hear is the London Philharmonic Orchestra's Ring the Bells, which was composed by Paul Fincham. The London Philharmonic Orchestra are long-time supporters of Chrysis and have kindly donated the royalties of this song to help support our work. It's the perfect accompaniment to the Christmas season. So let's get going. We've got a lovely evening planned for you, and to start we have a special message from our patron, Her Royal Highness, Princess Alexandra.
As patron of Chrysis, I feel privileged to be associated with the staff, volunteers and supporters who make the work of this remarkable charity possible. Christmas is a special time of year for so many of us. It is an opportunity to enjoy time with family and friends in the security and comfort of our homes, something we can take for granted. However, with the many losses and the uncertainty we face from the global pandemic, perhaps fewer of us will be able to do so this year. Christmas offers no such comfort or security for those people Chrysis supports, much less the opportunity to take it for granted. This, in 21st century Britain, is an injustice that Chrysis is resolved to eradicate. Whilst I'm saddened that we cannot be together in person for this occasion, I'm delighted to join you here in this virtual space, united in the belief that no one should be homeless and alone this Christmas.
A big thank you to Her Royal Highness for that touching message. I was particularly struck by the thought that so many of us are enjoying Christmas in the security of our homes, celebrating with family and friends. While sadly, Christmas for anyone facing homelessness offers no such security, and instead of celebrating with friends and family, it can often be spent alone. This is why the work of Crisis is so important. Last Christmas, we helped over 4,500 people receive a special Christmas that was full of warmth, company and expert care. As Her Royal Highness said, the coronavirus has impacted every area of our lives, and this is true for the tens of thousands of people experiencing homelessness in Britain today. However, we've met this challenge head on, and through the fantastic work of our volunteers, ambassadors and supporters, we've been able to establish connections and improve new and existing relationships for hundreds of people this year. There's no doubt that this Christmas will be quite different, but our ambition remains the same. Usually at Christmas, we mobilise a unique volunteering effort so that we can provide warmth, companionship and vital services for what is an incredibly challenging time of year for many. Our aims this year are the same, but the way in which we do it will look quite different. We'll be offering hotel accommodation so guests can self-isolate should they need to. And guests will enjoy a lovely Christmas meal, and importantly, will be able to access support, advice and some much needed friendship via our incredible volunteers, who this year will provide this digitally. It's more vital than ever that we step up and be the support that's needed. So if you'd like to support our work, please visit crisis.org.uk/donate. Your support really does make such a difference, especially at Christmas time. Many of us are going to be locked down with 2 other households, but it's easy to forget that others are locked out with nobody at all. When gathered together in person, we usually hear a Christmas message from the Dean hosting us, and I'm delighted to say that Neil Gardner, Dean of Canongate Kirk, has recorded this Christmas message for us today, and here it is.
Greetings from Canongate Kirk, the Kirk of Holyrood House and of Edinburgh Castle. I'm really sorry we're unable to host our usual carol service for Crisis this year. It always comes early in our Christmas season on the Royal Mile and gets us off to a really good start. The parish of Canongate itself got off to a good start many centuries ago in the year 1128. It was that year that, legend has it, the king went hunting one day in what we now call Holyrood Park, but in those days was a thickly wooded area on the slopes of Arthur's Seat and Salisbury Crags, and full of deer. During the course of his hunt, the king became unseated from his horse and separated from his companions, and finding himself alone and defenceless on the ground, he realised that an angry stag was rapidly approaching, with its antlers, sharp antlers, pointing straight at him. The king feared he might die, and he prayed that he might not. And legend has it that as he prayed, he had a vision of the cross of Jesus between the antlers of the stag, and suddenly the stag stopped in its tracks and withdrew to the forest. And the king regained his horse and rode up the Royal Mile back to Edinburgh Castle. And safe within its ancient walls, he vowed that as a sign of his thankfulness, he would build an abbey as close to the spot where his life had been spared. And so the story of the Abbey of Holyrood, which in old language means Holy Cross, began to take shape all those centuries ago in 1128. The abbey itself and the monastery buildings around it were built up and developed, and then faded. And the guest house of the abbey evolved into the palace of Holyrood House, which still to this day is the Queen's official residence in Scotland. And to this day we too have as our parish emblem the cross set amidst the antlers of the stag. It's a story of prayer and perseverance, of triumph over adversity, of overcoming the odds when everything seems stacked against us. And such a story strikes a chord, I think, with some of the themes that so often come through our annual carol service here. I hope we will see for ourselves those themes come through again next year. But in the meantime, may I wish you all, when the time comes, a very happy and peaceful Christmas.
Thank you, Neil, for that incredibly timely Christmas message. I'm sure many of you this year can relate to how you too have persevered and overcome adversity. In April, we were unable to see family members, children were unable to go to school, and hospitals were at breaking point, and it all felt pretty hopeless. Then, on Thursday nights, we all joined together to clap for our key workers, and just like that, we felt part of something again. Then in September, fresh-faced 4-year-olds attended school for the very first time, and in less than 3 weeks, families will be able to reunite for Christmas dinner. We've seen firsthand how important it is to have something to hold on to and to focus on to get you through those difficult moments, which brings me to the next video. Singing is one of the activities we provide that can help build confidence in the people we work side by side with. It can help those of us who might have experienced extreme isolation feel part of something again. It's not dissimilar to how we got our pots and pans out on a Thursday, not only so we could say thanks, but also so we could feel a sense of togetherness. Singing allows members we work with to build networks, and one such network is the choir we're about to hear, made up of crisis members, staff and supporters Jules Holland and Ruby Turner. With no congregational carols this year, please do join in at home and sing at the top of your voices.
Sleep in a heavenly peace.
That was a bit special. Thank you to Jules Holland, Ruby Turner and the entire choir for that. Also, a big well done to you at home. We'd love to hear what you're making of this year's unique service. So if you use the hashtag Crisis Carol Concert, we'll make sure we respond to some of your comments as we go through the night. It would be amazing if you could support us by including this link in your comment, crisis.org.uk/donate, so that we can raise even more awareness of the great work that's going on. Now I am so excited for this next segment. Jo Brand is a Crisis ambassador and long-time supporter, and this year she's doing something special. In this next video, Jo will be reading A Night Before Christmas by Clement Clarke Moore. So sit back, grab a mulled wine or a hot chocolate and enjoy Jo's reading.
And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my hand and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew, like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
Oh, wasn't that gorgeous? Thank you, Jo, for that festive reading. I am already feeling more Christmassy. Our next video comes from Crisis ambassador and longtime friend, the wonderful actor Jonathan Pryce. Jonathan will be reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 to 9.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world.
Thank you to Jonathan Pryce for that reading. A reading that I think took on greater poignancy this year. A year that's seen an awful lot of darkness, but also some real moments of light. Nobody embodies this more than our next speaker, Danny, a Crisis member from Wales.
My name is Danny Williams. Crisis have helped me out massively by helping me get into a hostel and find my own place. I've done many different courses and activities with Crisis, from maths and English to dog walking. Their help has made a massive difference to my life, from helping me get on the right medication to help me with my confidence. I have worked with other services, but it was Crisis who helped me get through to the other side and end my homelessness. Crisis never gave up on me. They always did what they said they was going to do, and I finally found a service that cares about me. It doesn't matter what you do, they will always be there for you, and each individual is good at what they do. I always knew that my progression coach would be there for my mental health, and that my tutor would be there for me to learn and gain some education, but most importantly, they all work well together for my progression to help end my homelessness. Now I can see light at the end of the tunnel, and the skills that they have taught me will help me progress in my life. Thank you.
It's not easy being so open and so honest, but in doing so, I think Danny has shown how Crisis can really help and how we work side by side developing a tailored package of support for our members. Thank you, Danny. That was an incredibly personal and powerful story. Next, touching upon this and reflecting on the year, the Crisis Chief Executive John Sparks has recorded this message.
Good evening, and thank you to our Crisis Choir and to everyone who's already spoken. I'm John Sparks. I have the privilege of being the Chief Executive of Crisis. Thank you for tuning in tonight and for your support. I'm really delighted to welcome you all, but saddened not to be marking Christmas with you in person in one of the many beautiful churches and cathedrals that would usually host us, as you saw a little earlier. During this year, virtual gatherings have been an ongoing feature of our school, work and home lives. Many of us has found what we've been calling the new normal challenging, to say the least. Crisis staff and volunteers are no different. They've been holding their own fears brought about by the coronavirus pandemic, while continuing to offer emotional and practical support to people in their personal journeys away from homelessness. Homelessness is a frightening and terrible situation for people to be forced to experience. And it's something that should have no place in 21st century Britain. The constant stress, worry and danger of not having a safe place to call home can be overwhelming. The pandemic added to this. When we were being advised to wash our hands, to socially distance and self-isolate, what do you do when you're sleeping rough or you're homeless in a night shelter or a hostel with shared facilities? Many of you will have heard of Crisis because of the work we do at Christmas. Whilst Crisis offers something very special over Christmas, our work really is year-round. And I'm personally incredibly proud of our staff, volunteers, friends and supporters, and their resolve to end the injustice that is homelessness, person by person, place by place, and policy by policy. And when I tell you a little about what they've been doing throughout 2020, I think you'll understand why. We have 11 skylight centres throughout England, Scotland and Wales, and everything we do is about ending homelessness. We provide direct services to thousands of people who are homeless all year round. Over the last year, Crisis has supported over 8,000 people, providing one-to-one support, specialist training and practical skills, help to find housing and employment, and access to a range of creative and vocational classes to help build the confidence and resilience necessary for people to move on from the trauma of homelessness. And we campaign for change, drawing on our research, partnerships, and the experience of people who are or have been homeless. The pandemic has meant that the way we do all of that has been turned on its head. From March, we were no longer able to welcome people to Crisis buildings and encourage them to work with us in person. So we innovated, we adapted, and all of our skylight centres continue to work in support of our members. We gave people mobile phones, topped up credit and provided laptops and data. We redesigned our services, created online activities and taught classes online. But when people needed us, we were also there face to face to help with whatever was needed, food vouchers, arranging for a place to stay. Our Birmingham Skylight, for example, provided over 200 food parcels and wellbeing packs during the lockdown. In partnership with the local authority in Liverpool, we ensured that every person experiencing homelessness in the city was safely housed during lockdown. And during our ongoing work, 61 people will have their own homes this Christmas because of that work. In addition to providing some of the very basics of life, we also continued services designed to support wellbeing, relationships, and mental health. In Croydon, for example, we facilitated rehearsals for a theatre production online. Our Skylight in Spitalfields in London provided art materials to rough sleepers staying in hotels and created an online gallery to share their creations. In Edinburgh, services were adapted to provide people unable to claim support from the government with tailored English classes and employability support. And in Oxford, Art in Isolation was born, and our volunteer drivers delivered craft materials for use in online classes with our art tutors. As you can see, we've achieved a great deal over the past year, despite the pandemic, and it doesn't stop there. It's not possible to share everything I'd like to in this short amount of time, but I do want to tell you particularly about our In This Together campaign. This called on everyone to protect those who were most exposed during the pandemic. You, our supporters, responded phenomenally. You raised the money that allowed us to establish an emergency grant fund that supported more than 215 smaller grassroots homelessness charities to continue their work in very difficult circumstances. 2020 has been a difficult year for so many reasons. For Crisis, one of those is the death of one of our founders, Nick Beacock. Nick was Crisis' first chair in 1967. I understand from those closest to him that he wasn't keen on publicity and plaudits, but it's so important to us, to me, to recognise him. I would also encourage you to read more about the remarkable and kind-spirited man that he was. That year, 1967, was the start of decades of Nick's tireless campaigning for the rights of poorly housed people and people who were homeless. He was determined in his approach, which was passionate and persistent. He knew firsthand the damage homelessness did to people's lives and did not flinch from telling truth to power. The 1977 Homeless Persons Act was perhaps his greatest achievement. It was the first law of its kind and has meant that since 1977, over 4 million households have been rehoused by their council. Nick went on to successfully fight many other campaigns, including working at Shelter for many years, running their campaign for bedsit rights. This legacy of fearless campaigning, motivated by social justice, remains at the heart of Crisis today, and we owe it to Nick and to his fellow pioneers to continue until homelessness is ended. We know that the Christmas season can exacerbate an existing sense of loneliness and isolation for people who are homeless. This year, like every year, Crisis will provide services that address our guests' health and well-being needs, as well as warmth, food, companionship, and support. It will, however, be quite different this year, as it will all have to be COVID safe. We'll be accommodating hundreds of people in hotels staffed by our ever-resilient volunteers. Crisis will still provide advice and support with health, housing, employment and benefits when we open those hotels in just over a week's time. But Crisis at Christmas is just the beginning of helping people out of homelessness. We introduce people to our year-round services. It's the long-term support that helps people to leave homelessness behind for good. Even though Crisis at Christmas will look different this year, the volunteers who make it possible won't. Crisis volunteers, many of whom I know will be listening tonight, are a unique group of people, the backbone of Crisis at Christmas, and the reason so many people experiencing homelessness will feel supported and heard this festive season. Giving up their time so generously sends a powerful message that this society doesn't tolerate the injustice that is homelessness. Homelessness is not inevitable. We know that it can be ended with the right support and the right motivation. We also know that we can't do it without your support. That's why we always say, together, we will end homelessness. I hope you enjoy the rest of this evening, and I wish you a very happy Christmas. This year, like everyone, we've experienced the dramatic contrast between plans and reality. All of us at Crisis have faced unforeseen challenges, and I've taken great inspiration from the ways our employees, supporters, partners, and most importantly, our members have dealt with these unprecedented times. They've done so with the full force of our values of resolve, adaptability, and dignity. If the year has shown us one thing, it's the fundamental necessity of a safe and secure home. Homelessness has always been a dangerous and even life-threatening situation. But in March, it became a public health emergency when people were exposed to the coronavirus on the streets or in crowded shelters. Our priorities changed overnight as we responded to the urgency of the crisis. It could have been a humanitarian disaster for people with nowhere to isolate. And our priorities have changed again as we look to the longer-term impact of the pandemic. Of course, when the coronavirus hit, our immediate priority was making sure people were safe. We called for and then strongly welcomed the Westminster government's Everyone In scheme, which saw thousands of people brought into temporary hotel accommodation, and equivalent programmes ran in Wales and Scotland. Huge steps were made during the pandemic by governments, local authorities and organisations to protect people facing homelessness. Safe emergency accommodation was provided to people experiencing homelessness. More than 30,000 across Great Britain were helped by the end of October. We quickly adapted our services. In some areas like Liverpool, we supported local authorities to find places for people to stay. We kept our buildings open for as long as it was safe to do so. We found ways to provide mobile phones and data. This meant that our members could still access our support online when face-to-face sessions became too dangerous. Our emergency appeal, In This Together, saw an overwhelmingly generous response from our supporters, both existing and new. It enabled us to provide grants to smaller homelessness organisations across the country to adapt their services in the face of the pandemic. This support meant they could provide food deliveries and personal protective equipment and offer tailored support to people in the most challenging situations, including those facing domestic abuse. Crucially, people with no access to any form of state support were also helped by this appeal. We also called for and saw radical action taken to prevent people from becoming homeless during the lockdown. Evictions were temporarily put on hold and housing benefit was increased to ensure that more people weren't pushed onto the streets during the lockdown. That this radical, robust action was possible fuels our deep conviction that ending homelessness is absolutely possible. Of course, a hotel room is not a home. The future is still uncertain for many people who have been temporarily housed. We're now shifting our focus, helping people leaving hotels find somewhere secure and permanent to live. We can't let the progress made this year unravel. We must look towards longer-term solutions, such as building the social homes we desperately need and ensuring that housing benefit continues to cover the true cost of rents so that people can afford to keep their homes. This Christmas will look different for all of us, but especially so for the guests we usually welcome into our centres. But we're determined that people won't miss out on the companionship and vital services that we offer. We're committed to providing somewhere safe to stay, support from volunteer befrienders, essential food and festive treats, phone and online support, Christmas activity packs of arts and crafts, games and quizzes, health and wellbeing programmes, year-round support with training and education, advice on housing, employment and benefits, and the chance to leave homelessness behind for good. The future is unknown, but what remains true is our resolute belief that there must be a home for all, and that with our generous and committed supporters alongside us, we can achieve this.
Thank you to John for that address, and I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing condolences to Nick's family. As John says, we'd encourage you to read about Nick's legacy, which can be seen on the Crisis website. Some of the achievements John walked us through are breathtaking, especially considering the impact of coronavirus. And in particular, I'd like to highlight the campaigning done by Crisis that's resulted in a change of policy for people impacted by domestic abuse. The work Crisis has done ensures anyone escaping domestic abuse is now guaranteed a home. And it's amazing to see in that video just how much has been achieved at Crisis this year. Everybody has really come together in what's undoubtedly been a challenging year. And as the video stated, what's clear is that everybody needs a safe and secure home, and now more than ever. We've seen that coronavirus doesn't discriminate, but for anyone experiencing homelessness, it's even more deadly. If you're unable to take shelter, how can you isolate and protect yourself from this disease? That's why Crisis's work is so important. Now, hosting this event has coincided with the incredible news of the coronavirus vaccine approval. A vaccine was created because the whole scientific community came together as one with a common goal, and just look at the result. If we needed evidence of what we can achieve when the will is there, then surely that is it. Ending homelessness is not some sort of lofty pipe dream. At Crisis, we've already done the research which explains how to end homelessness. Now, like the vaccine, we need people to come together and work as one to drive real change and end homelessness once and for all. So here's a reminder of that all-important link and how you can help support Crisis. crisis.org.uk/donate. Christmas is such an important period, as guests joining us at this time of year are often starting their journey out of homelessness. And the support we've received throughout the year has been humbling, but like John said, the hard work is just beginning. We now have another treat for you. The Crisis Choir are going to be singing Auld Lang Syne, but before they do, remember to keep those social media messages coming in and to use the hashtag Crisis Carol Concert. Now over to the choir.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to light? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. And surely you'll be your kindness too, and surely I'll be mine, and we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne, for old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. And there's a hand, my trusty friend, and give me a hand, oh thine, and we'll drink the right good really wort for old lang syne, for old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to light? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne, for old lang syne.
Oh, that was great. Thank you once again to the Crisis Choir. We now have a very inspiring story from Manuel, who is a member of Crisis Skylight Croydon. And I should point out that some of you may find the content of his story disturbing.
Hi, my name is Manuel. I'm an asylum seeker from Brazil. As a gay man living in Brazil, it started being a very dangerous place to be. The new president hates LGBT people and started working against us. Some of my friends had been murdered. Afraid I had to leave my country, so I came to the UK. It was impossible to find anywhere to live because of my immigration status. I ended up sleeping rough. Looking help around accommodation and immigration, I went to Pryce. They helped me sorting out a place where to sleep in a floating shelter, told me advice where to go about immigration, and also I was able to join a training course on hospitality. But unfortunately, I became ill. I was having shingles. I couldn't sleep anymore in the floating shelter. I saw myself again sleeping rough. I became more and more ill. I was coughing, and then I had to come back to the hospital, and they told me to go home and self-isolate. I was having coronavirus. But they didn't let me say that I didn't have a home where to go to. I was 14 days sleeping in a camp tent inside Clapham Common Park until StreetLink found me and placed me in a hotel. But I was still ill. I came back to the hospital, and after a couple of tests, they told me I tested positive for HIV. I was devastated. I came back to the hotel, and I had the opportunity to get back in contact with my caseworker from Pryce. She helped me about my HIV status and also start working again around my immigration. Now I have a solicitor working on my asylum claim, and I have a peer support worker around my HIV status. I'm feeling much happier and able to look at some of my goals. Once my immigration is done, I would like to work with social care, supporting LGBT community, asylum seekers, and people living with HIV. My biggest wish is everyone who is vulnerable to be supported, and there to be nobody else left having to survive on the streets. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Manuel, for so bravely telling your story and being so open. It's never easy to hear stories like these, but it's so important we do, so we can hear firsthand the impact crisis has on the people we support. It also reaffirms our commitment to end homelessness, so people don't have to endure what Manuel has these last few months. And just like that, we've reached the end of our service. So thank you so much to all of our speakers and performers tonight, and to all of you watching at home. To play us out, we've got some messages from Crisis staff and supporters. And all that's left for me to say is I wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas, good health, and a very Happy New Year.
At Christmas, home is the place where I can connect to my friends and family.
My boys come over, we have a great big Christmas lunch together.
And having lots of fun and food, we get the chance to be together.
At Christmas, a home means the same to me as it does year round. It's a safe place to call my own, and no one should have to choose between sleeping on the streets or staying in unsafe accommodation this Christmas.
There's so much uncertainty and so many unanswered questions going into this Christmas and New Year, but one thing's for sure, when you give to Crisis, every penny of that money will be spent to end homelessness.
Housing advice, training and work experience are just some of the things that we can provide with your help at Crisis in order to support our members into secure accommodation.
2020's been a tough year for all of us, but it's shown the importance of sticking together, of how people who look after one another really can make a difference.
It's shown how much we depend on each other for connection, hope and support.
By supporting Crisis, you're helping to ensure that people facing homelessness this year won't be alone this Christmas.
We can't end homelessness on our own, so please give £28.22 today to help us give somebody a Crisis Christmas.
No one should be homeless and alone this Christmas.
Everybody has the right to a place to live, to be off the streets, out of the cold, particularly this time of year. The right to housing should be a human right. I feel that Crisis are fighting for that.
I believe that we can and will end homelessness.
Together.
Together.
Together, we will end homelessness.
We will end homelessness.
And I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Wishing you a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas from me and Nihala Arthanaika to you, yours, lifelong nodding acquaintances and people you haven't hugged yet, when of course it's safe to start hugging again.
I'm wishing you all a very Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.